Hi everybody, John Bailey here, gemstone artist and founder of the International Faceting Academy. We're here today with a video about buying used equipment and also about transfer stands. That's why there's a transfer stand in the video. One of the challenges that new faceters face in buying equipment, especially if they buy used equipment, is understanding just how fine and delicate high precision faceting equipment is. These are high precision optical instruments. I sometimes take difference with calling them machines because the word machine sometimes invokes ideas of earth moving equipment or construction equipment, and this sometimes leads people to handle the equipment in a more rough fashion than is good for it. And that's part of what we're going to see today with this transfer stand. This stand was sent to me by a new faceter who purchased used equipment and was under the belief that the equipment had been, quote, treated well. We're going to see that that's not really been the case. So this is a standard facetron transfer stand. This threaded carriage bolt that's been threaded through part of the stand, this just came to me this way. So apparently someone was attempting to use the carriage bolt to pull the pieces of the transfer stand together because they weren't actually moving. So applying more force is not a thing that we do with precision instrumentation. Might be a thing we do with construction equipment, not with precision optical gear. So let's begin with a little bit of an inspection of this Facetron transfer stand. We can see the Facetron trademark stamped in the bottom and top plates. Let's figure out which end is the top and which end is the bottom, or which end is supposed to move and which end is supposed to be fixed. Because at first glance, we might imagine that this block on the right is the one that's supposed to travel, and the block on the left might be the one that's supposed to be fixed. If we look at the end, we'll see that this piece is barely on the ends of the rails, so maybe that's not correct. What we find by looking at other transfer stands that I have is that the label should be on the bottom, or the non-moving block, and this counterboard hole that's unthreaded, that also should be on the non-moving block. The threaded hole should be on the moving block. So this is the block that should move, and this block should be flush with the bottom ends of the two rails. So right away we know a few things are amiss. Let's begin with a basic inspection of what kind of condition our transfer stand is in. And one of the things we notice right away is that there's a great deal of dirt or glue or something. This feels like residue of epoxy all the way around our blocks. One of the techniques I like to use for inspecting transfer stands, and especially these black anodized rails on the Facetron equipment, is a little black light. And it tends to make our epoxy or super glue or whatever else, any kind of residues that we might have, it tends to make those things light up, make them a little bit easier to find. So if we zoom in a little bit closer, we can see this bunch of epoxy here, and there's some more here, and kind of see that we've got a lot of contamination, a lot of junk on the rails. Even in a transfer stand that's not damaged, we want to always inspect it very carefully, because crap on the rails is going to make it bind, it's going to make it not work, and we get it in the wrong spots. For instance, in the areas where the dops are going to make contact with the stand, that's going to cause a misalignment, and we're going to have bad transfers from that. So looking at this visually, besides what we detect with our UV light, let's begin with this end, which is supposed to be the base. And one of the things that we'll notice besides the dirt is we'll notice a lot of little dents and dings. A lot of little dents and dings. All of this little type of stuff, all they have to do is come into the wrong place, and then they're going to start causing a lot of problems. If we look really closely, we can see there's a dent right here where the railing is passing through the block. So this has been struck with a hammer or something right next to the hole where the rail passes through. Here's another indication of that kind of damage. Here's another one right here. When you have this, you pretty much know that you're going to wind up with some kind of misalignment. These things aren't supposed to be beat up this way. Here's another dent caused by some sort of an impact. There's another dent here. Any of these impacts, depending on how they fall, here's another one. So this is a transfer stand that's been pretty well abused. That's from looking at the block that's supposed to be unmovable. And if we look at the inside of it, we'll see a number of impacts here, and we'll see that the aluminum has been bent, has been moved. Any kind of an impact like this, if you talk to somebody who sets stones, or if you know about stone setting, an impact downward on here is going to cause this aluminum to travel towards the bottom of the frame. So it's going to cause this aluminum to stand proudly, and any dop that's put in here, any portion of this that contacts the dop, it's going to misalign the dop by tilting it towards us. So just an indication of a whole bunch of abuse, a whole bunch of using some kind of an impact tool, striking this thing. More dents here, more dents here. Dents again where the rails are passing through, and this is going to cause misalignment of the rails. This is again supposed to be the base or non-moving end of the transfer stand. If we look at the end that's supposed to move, the end with the threaded hole, we find again a whole bunch of hammer blows, some kind of impacts around where the rails are. Impacts here. And then when we look at the top end, the sockets where the rails are supposed to travel through, a whole bunch of hammer strikes right around this. So striking the aluminum here is definitely going to cause it to move into the cylinder, and that's going to prevent the rail absolutely from sliding through the cylinder. I can catch this with this paper clip. I can snag the paper clip on that bent aluminum where it's been mashed into the hole. And this is true around both rails. So this has been struck with hammers for some reason. You see a bunch of other stray hammer blows here. If we look inside, where we should have a really nice smooth cylinder to slide against our rails, we can see that the aluminum has actually been peeled up by the end of our rail by having it forced into the cylinder. It's actually been peeled up. So we're machining, by forcing that rail through this hole, we are actually machining the inside of our cavity here. So this transfer stand is destroyed. Maybe someone could use pieces of this as raw material, but I'm going to guess that you're better off starting from scratch and building a new transfer stand just from scratch than in any way trying to rehab this thing or bring it back into any kind of function. One of the places I do want to call your attention to, if you are looking at a piece of used equipment or inspecting your own equipment for its function, always look at the bearing surfaces where your dop is going to connect with your transfer stand. Look both at this surface and at this surface. And I don't know what these little items are, little bits of detritus in here, and they look like they're loose. but it doesn't take very much at all to get it against your DOP keying in here, and then you'll have a twist in your transfer, and that's only going to cause stair stepping in your girdle. But any problems down here, for instance, where these hammer shots have been, this aluminum has been moved. It's not super obvious to the eye, but it has been moved. You're going to have a misaligned DOP. There's no way the DOPs are going to mate properly coming through here. So we want to inspect, and certainly if you begin to have issues after transfer, always inspect this bearing area. Always look for, has this been bumped? Because it's pretty easy to accidentally bump this. I mean, this looks like it's been beat on with a hammer, but it's pretty easy to accidentally bump this. And as soon as you do that, your alignment is just toast. Here there's, I think that's leftover glue that's actually stuck in there. And glue hiding under your DOP hold down, especially on a Facetron DOP or one that's keyed with a flat surface like this. This is the keying surface. This black anodized thing is the keying surface, and a piece of epoxy or super glue or something stuck right there, if that gets on the edge of your keying, it's absolutely going to screw up your transfer. We've taken our two clamp plates off the transfer stand for closer inspection. And this is a thing that you might want to do anytime you're cleaning up your transfer stand, anytime you're chasing transfer problems, anytime you're inspecting a secondhand transfer stand to see if maybe you want to buy it. And so there are some telltale signs here. One of the things we notice on this clamp is smudges of epoxy, and this isn't damming in the place that it is. There's another big blob of epoxy here. It's not so damning that these, where they are going to cause a problem, and certainly you can clean this off. It is a reflection of how the equipment has been cared for, or rather not well cared for. So we see more epoxy on the bearing surface here and here. We can look pretty close, and we can see where the footprint of contact of our DOP keying surface is. We reflect the light just right off this clamp, and we can see the lines here. So this epoxy is not impinging on the footprint of the DOP. The keyed DOP looks like this, and we can see the footprint where it's making contact. So this one isn't awful, should have the epoxy cleaned off of it, and the epoxy is really just, again, a reflection of perhaps how this hasn't been well cared for. If we look at the other clamp on it, we can also see a blob of epoxy here and here, and blobs of epoxy here on the end. The real issue with this, and it wasn't super apparent while it was still on the stand, is as we rotate this over, we're going to see this little thing. Doesn't look like much here under this magnification. If we turn this, we might start to see just how big of an issue this is. This is not a blob of epoxy. This is a strike. This is where this has been dropped or hit with a hard object, and we've bent the aluminum, causing a raised zone here on the bearing surface. And if we look at the footprint, if we reflect the light correctly to get an indication where the footprint is, where does the DOP bear on this? And this big raised area comes right on the edge of the DOP footprint on this clamp, and this also is a little raised area here. So they're unequal, so they don't cancel each other out. What's going to happen when you try to use this transfer stand? Every single DOP that's held by this clamp on this side is going to be twisted because of its contact with this dent. And here we can see this a great deal closer. This is with some magnification, and we can inspect it a little bit from different angles with this additional magnification, and you can really see how striking or allowing this to be dropped has really pretty much destroyed the utility of this part of our transfer stand. We took the transfer stand apart to see just how badly trashed our moving end block was. And one of the things that we can see here is a big blob of what looks like epoxy. I don't know if you see the UV is going to light it up a little bit. So this is more this UV technique for inspection for finding epoxy. Again, you don't really need it for this one, but we can get the idea that it's useful to use UV when you're inspecting. How bad off is this thing where those rails were pounded through apparently with a hammer, and we can see right here this big shoulder where the aluminum was just machined by being slammed in here on both sides. Great big shoulders. Big shoulders here. So this is one of the reasons that we don't really recommend uninitiated fasteners buying used equipment, because a lot of people would look at this and just not realize how utterly egregious this damage is, that this is a completely destroyed piece of equipment and not something that we can really reasonably expect to rehabilitate and put it back in service. So this is a little bit about transfer stands, inspection, cleanliness, delicacy, how to care for these things. A lot of people I've seen throw this into a toolbox literally with screwdrivers and wrenches, and it'll just trash it. My transfer stands are always wrapped very carefully in a shop towel and put in a very specific place, whether I'm carrying them or even just normally in the shop. I don't have them just hanging around where they could get knocked off a shelf, something dropped on them. This aluminum is soft and it's really easy to bugger it up. So I hope this is useful to everyone. Be careful buying equipment. If you're considering buying used equipment and you're not a seasoned fastener, at the very minimum, get a very seasoned fastener to help you examine the equipment. In general, really just buy new equipment. So that's all for now. Until next time, good meats.